Welcome, world, to my channel podcast again on YouTube. And I want to introduce a very special member of our profession, Dr. Phil McMaster in New Zealand currently. He's a former founding member of the college foundation and a former president. He's about to step down as the current acting president, I believe. He'll correct me on that. But we're going to discuss, because I want Phil on the show because I love New Zealand College of Chiropractic. Many people hold it in high regard and esteem. And so it'd be great to talk to Phil on a personal basis and just see what makes him tick. And Phil, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you. Just to correct you as you invited me, I resigned as the president of the New Zealand College of Chiropractic at the end of March. So the chairman of the board, Ash Pritchard, has been standing in as the interim president while they're in the process of finding a new president, which I understand is in their second round of interviews probably this weekend. So yes, I'm up until then, I'd been involved with the college since it started in 1994, actually before that in 1992. When a group of us decided we would start our own college. And so I had been involved just about every capacity. As it turns out, there's nothing else for me to do there. I was taught philosophy since day one and was the head of philosophy for 27 years and chairman of the board for 10 years and president for 8 years. So I don't know whether there's any other position I could fill there, but had a wonderful time working with the college and the people at the college. It's a special place, as you kind of mentioned, and I'm very, very proud of what's been achieved at the New Zealand College.
Yeah, well, I have a great affiliation via memory, and in 2002 we had Carl Cleveland III, Vicky Palmer, refresh my memory, who was
Guy Reekman was there. And I'm not sure, maybe could have been Brian McCauley, who was sort of standing in as Sherman's president then too. I think he might have been.
It was a great event. And it was, refresh my memory, it was some sort of rehashing of the school being affiliated with these very foundational colleges, and Palmer especially.
Actually, what happened was that was in 2002, September of 2002. I had stepped in as the interim president in April, May of that year.
Once again.
And the reason that all of those people were there, Carl Cleveland, Guy Reekman, Vicky Palmer especially, was because the college in 2002 was going to go under. It was almost insolvent. And so I was sort of tasked with the responsibility by the board to dig around and find out, what could be done and how we could find a way forward, which the way forward was clear. We had a very clear picture, but we had some, let's say, some arrears to take care of. And so I was very, very lucky to have been affiliated with and had some very good friends in some fairly high places in these colleges, and Guy Reekman was one of them. Carl Cleveland was another, and Brian McCauley, who was at Sherman at the time, was another. And essentially I asked them for some money. And so that Lyceum, actually, I spent the whole weekend. I hardly got to be at the Lyceum because I was in meetings all weekend convincing these people that if you give us $1 million, we will spend it wisely and we'll show you a pathway forward. And that's exactly what happened. So our friends from the States, who I had personal relationships with, came to the party. Vicky Palmer came at our invitation as well. And that's exactly what happened. They gave us $1 million between the three institutions and gave us, we gave them seats on the board at that stage. And a pathway forward, as I say, a plan. And we implemented that plan from that point on. And initially, I think they thought this was going to be in the form of a grant rather than a loan. It had to be set up as a loan from a legal point of view to begin with, but they thought they'd probably be forgiving that loan, but we paid it all back in full. And probably, I think, about less than 6 years. So basically after that Lyceum, my celebration was afterwards when they agreed to the terms, and it was either going to be a really big send-off or a really great welcome. And it turned out to be, because that was our first ever Lyceum.
Yes, that was the inaugural. I was there.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was at the Hilton Hotel. It had just been built on the waterfront in Auckland, and we got a great deal from them because I think we might have been the first conference actually booked. So,
wow, yeah, it was a great event, and the college continued to play a part in my life as I lectured there a couple of times on upper cervical, atlas orthogonal, and Brian Kelly was very welcoming, and he seemed to be a great host. But back to Phil McMaster, where did you graduate, Phil? What drove you in the early days to get involved with the crazy idea of a college? And then we'll talk about the future.
Yeah. Well, I graduated from Sherman College of Straight Chiropractic in 1985, in March of 85. My first born son was born just before then, and his mother and I were both students at the college. So in your 12th quarter at Sherman, then, if you had all your requisite work done, and you'd passed everything, you could do an externship, they called it, where you could go out and work for a chiropractor for that last quarter. Because of the situation where I had this, baby and a wife who was a year behind me, I wasn't really able to do that. So the college, Sherman College, actually asked me if I would consider doing what they called a senior internship. And as such, I was involved in assisting in some classes and in the X-ray department, and to some extent with care of people in the health centre, as it was, supervising some students, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I got hooked in. That was my first kind of introduction into education. And in fact, one of the classes I was assisting in was Leroy Moore, who was the vice president of the college. He taught upper cervical contacts. You would have liked this, Joe.
Yeah.
And I assisted Leroy in that class. Well, as it turned out, I ended up teaching it because Leroy had to stand in for Tom Gelati, who was away most of the time fighting the CCE because they were suing Sherman. See,
back then.
So that's how I sort of dipped my toes into the education lake, if you like, and the temperature wasn't too bad, and I actually ended up teaching a few more classes and getting into teaching some philosophy as well. So that was sort of my introduction. I was a passionate student and then a passionate graduate, and then came back to New Zealand, set up a practice in Taupo, which is in the middle of the North Island, the big lake. Did outrageously well there and thoroughly enjoyed it. And had a couple of friends who did the same, people who graduated in and around the same time I did, who came back to New Zealand. There was quite a group of us there at Sherman at that stage. Anyway, we all got busy. We didn't even know what an associateship was. You just opened your practice, right? And we had a wonderful community of very supportive chiropractors in New Zealand. Then people who a lot of the Australians will know, people like Les Whitehead.
Oh yes, Les. God, and if you don't know about Les Whitehead, you'd better find out. Is he still practicing?
Yes, he is. Yeah.
Oh God, he must be what?
He's 83, I think now.
Yep.
He'd be around
and
about
who else
that.
was illustrious at those times? Les was kind of the top dog.
Yeah. Warren Nolan also practiced
in filter plane.
No, that's John Nolan, his brother. But
really?
Warren, yeah.
So one saw patients and one protected them.
I suppose so, but Les and Warren in the same town basically were competing with each other to see who could see the most people, and I think it was up to about 1,500 a week or something like that. So it was ridiculous. But We had people like, like Les and Warren and John Nolan as well, Richard Chain, who's from a long line of chiropractors in their family, the McCarthys, who they go back. Virgil Strang is a relative of theirs.
Oh,
They were
really?
they were in New Zealand then.
Wow.
Robin Taylor and of course a few of the other cronies. Jim Stanier was back here then as well, and of course Brett Island, who was my roommate at Sherman College. And in actual fact, it ended up being Jim Stanier, Robin Taylor, myself, and Brett Island who really drove the foundation or the establishment of the New Zealand College of Chiropractic. But we were all in practice, we're all doing very, very well and really busy and needed people to help us, but we weren't really getting them because most of the people were coming previously back from the States, and the New Zealand dollar had devalued, and it was worth about 44 US cents or something. And
Wow.
it was just getting very difficult as the costs were going up there. And, with respect, I think the only college then in Australia that was really producing many New Zealanders or people want to come back here was RMIT, which was Pitt before that, or Phillips Institute. Yep. But I think they took a very small number of New Zealanders every year. So we were literally, we needed more chiropractors. So we used to gather this group of people. We used to get together and share ideas. I mean, I know there are a lot of coaches out there who give a lot of great advice and guide people, but there was no such thing here then. All we used to do is get together in a central location about once every quarter, have a meal and a bit of activities and a few drinks. And it was basically at one of these meetings that I think it might have, it was me who mentioned, well, why don't we just bloody start our own college? And of course, we'd had a few drinks by then. And when someone says something like that, and then they have a few more drinks, you end up painting yourself into a corner. So that basically started from there. And so Robin Taylor, myself, Jim Stanier, and Brett Island we all became councillors or executive councillors of the New Zealand Chiropractors Association. And that was really our vehicle or our way of persuading the rest of the profession to believe in us, if you like. And we came up with a cunning plan that we called Vision 2000. This is back in 1993 or end of 92. And it basically was a blueprint for here's how we're going to do it. And it worked out really well. Jim Stanier, he drove it primarily, did a great job of driving that initiative, and he was supported by myself, Brett, and Robin Taylor. And essentially, Jim started as the first CEO of the college, and had a great vision and a great way of being able to complete things and do things academically as well. So that's how it all started. And so I was naturally kind of asked, well, you've taught philosophy before, and it's consistent with the sort of philosophy that larger group exemplified. So you better do it. But I was practicing in Taupo, which then meant that I would fly to Auckland one day a week and teach philosophy. And Jim Stanier, he taught skills, which was kind of technique. And our first scientific sort of lecturer was Bernadette Murphy, who then went on to supervise Heidi Horvath with her in her PhD. Oh. So that's how it all started. And that was my sort of not introduction into teaching in chiropractic, but more of a continuation that then became really a bit of a habit for for 27 years, teaching philosophy, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and I still it still is the thing that makes me smile and keeps me going.
Well, even I didn't realise how far your scope went, because you look so young, Phil.
Thank you.
However, with that broad scope of experience, give us an idea where we're going. What's the cutting edge at the moment? Are we lost? Are we doomed? Of course, you're a positive person, but how are we evolving now? There seems to be still a firm grip on traditional chiropractic, which I love. But, I've always been evidence-based, because to me, I always thought chiropractic was evidence-based from day bloody one, until they invented a word for it that was actually, let's not get into, it was just a propaganda hijack. But, where are we going, Phil? Where are we going?
That's a really good question, Joe. But I as you say, I'm an eternal optimist. Some people would say that chiropractic is going down two pathways, possibly, and whether we end up with two destinations or not, I don't know. All I do know is that there is still a very, very healthy appetite for chiropractic as you and I know it and love it.
Sort of Thomas Sherman, Parker.
And there was lots of other, they talk about it being vitalistic or straight chiropractic as it used to be known, et cetera, but that has a lot of sort of connotations to it that, I don't particularly like. But I think I agree with you. That,
well, if I may interject, Phil, you can practice medicine vitalistically too.
Yeah.
That's the problem I have with it.
Yeah, I got to stress.
So it's more about the innate, universal 33 principles and all that, and adjustment of the spine, right? So I agree with you.
Yeah, and I do think that it is self-evident. You talk about evidence-based. It is self-evident that a human body that's functioning better has a greater ability to self-regulate, self-coordinate, and self-heal. So there are very few people that I've, spoken with who I've asked the question, so do you think that given the right set of circumstances and the right environment, that your body can heal itself of virtually anything? And everyone says yes.
Yeah.
So that's part of that self-evidence. Now, what we do know is that the primacy of the nerve system is so important in terms of allowing a body to function more efficiently. And the relationship between the spine and the nerve system is just a big part of that. Well, I don't think you need to do a hell of a lot of research to actually understand that link between
that basic premise. Yes.
And that's what has always driven me. The idea that the body's ability to self-heal, self-regulate, self-organize, that is a vitalistic principle. Now, I got to stress, vitalism is not about being nice. A lot of people think that, that was very vitalistic of you. To what? To let me have that, that last piece of cake. What a vitalist you are. No, and I'm being silly, I know. That's not what it's about, because vitalism in its initial original days was all about some intangible life force that you couldn't, and that to some extent has perhaps got us in a little bit of trouble with the let's say the black and whites, the people who want everything to be black and white. Now, I think it's very evident that a body can heal itself in the right circumstances. You could spend a lot of time studying whatever that non-physical entity, force, whatever it is. You could spend a long time studying that, talking about it, and probably not coming up with some answers that the black and white people want. Or you could spend a lot of time just acknowledging whatever happens, the body can heal itself. Now let's look at what the contingent factors in that are. And a healthy spine and nerve system, that relationship between the two is incredibly important, because regardless of anything else, if the information from the nerve system to the rest of the body and back again is inaccurate, you will not function as well as you should. To me, that's always been the answer. And as I say, that's the whole philosophy is around it. You could talk about the simple safety pin cycle and the triune of life and the, all of those cycles that BJ and Ralph Stevenson did, the normal complete cycle and all that sort of stuff. You don't have to know that. It's kind of nice to be able to understand some of those things a little bit further, but you don't have to know that. And you know what? The people you take care of, they don't have to know about that either. They can, though, all acknowledge that they've noticed at some point that maybe they cut themselves, a paper cut or something like that. They didn't have to do anything, but it healed. That is the evidence that we need. Because then you can ask the question, so how did your body know to do that? And they could talk about all of the, the wonderful things that happen, the coagulation, the cleaning up of the leukocytes and the plates, all the sort of stuff that happens. You can study that and know it, but the reality is we can't duplicate that. It's just something that happens, and it's inherent within living systems.
Yeah. So turning to current affairs, how do you integrate X-ray spinography into some of the, you said two divisions are occurring, a division is occurring, and a lot of those on one side say, oh, X-rays are useless or something around that. How do you defend and integrate that in your students and your own mind?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think this is one area that still needs a lot of work, in my opinion, because when you teach X-ray, a lot of the X-ray knowledge is based around the technologies and pathology. And of course, pathology is very, very important in terms of understanding how that might affect the care that you give, and whether that person that you're taking care of may need some other care that's specialized, but not to you. I'm not denying that, but I think it's become more of that than anything else. And a lot of that, I think, is due to the third-party payers situation, where there has to be some kind of, again, evidence behind what you do. Now, there is plenty of evidence to show that the relationship between the spine and the nerve system is manifest in one way, good ways or bad ways, in some respects, by the anatomical structures and the relationship they have with the spinal cord and the nerves, et cetera, et cetera. And if there are some kind of considerations that need to be given for your corrective care of that relationship, X-rays, in my opinion, is very, very valuable. There was a study done at the New Zealand College of Chiropractic it was in about 2002, I think, when I was the interim president there, and we took like about 1,500 different X-rays and showed them to several different chiropractors and said, based on these X-rays, would there be any modification that you would make to the care that you give, or the delivery of the adjustment that you might think necessary for this person? And it was over 75% of the X-rays that were viewed were put into that category. I think we're losing that. I think that's not being emphasized enough because of the need, apparently, to provide evidence that chiropractic treats certain things and not other things. And you and I both know chiropractic doesn't actually treat anything. Chiropractic allows the body to treat itself. I often refer to the term, I think we should change our name from chiropractors to adapt enablers. That'd get going on it. Because essentially, what do? We remove interferences to the communication between the nerve system and the rest of the body via the spine. And I'm not suggesting that's the only place that it occurs either, by the way. But by removing interferences to those relationships between the two, we are essentially allowing that person or that body to be able to express itself more efficiently, more optimally, and as such, they may adapt more appropriately to the ever-changing environment they're in, because that's what healing is all about.
I love the way that you centralize the patient's adaptation and healing. And then you mentioned third-party payers. And I think that's the good and the evil. The evil is the third-party payer, the third party, whether it be even a government agency that wants to maximise and facilitate something and own it. And then, but we have largely existed with you and the patient, and that's about it. And your education back to chiropractic. Yeah. And I think the whole world, like what's going on with these viruses and all that, there's all these central bodies controlling the virus and telling you how to defeat it, rather than what you've touched on and have always touched on, and that essential enabling of the patient to be the battleground of existence, not some, here's the solution and you have to follow it. And I think that's how they're getting rid of x-rays, and our philosophy is that someone else is trying to dictate it, aren't they?
Yeah, I agree with that, because, it used to be that the third party pays the insurance and things like that. They, let's face it, their business is to pay out less than what they get in, right? That's how they make the huge profits that they make. So if they can pin us down, so to speak, and our use of x-rays to be limited to and useful only for acknowledging and identifying pathological conditions that probably need to be treated somewhere else, then that saves them money.
Yeah.
But, if you have an appreciation, and certainly, I practiced for nearly 30 years, and the utilization, and I've got to say it was judicious use of of x-rays for chiropractic care, as much as determining if there were any pathological situations that needed to be identified. I absolutely valued that, and I can say with my hand on my heart that the care that I delivered was enhanced dramatically because of the role that x-ray played in my analysis of the relationships between people's spines and their nerve system and overall function. And so I don't get it. I don't get it these days, just from an anecdotal point of view, if nothing else, that people, when I hear students saying, yeah, but I trust my patient, I think, mate, okay, that's good, but I've been doing this for 30 years, and I'm not sure whether I can fully trust it to the level that you think you've got it now.
Yeah, not when you've got some tools to use.
Yeah, we're fooling ourselves if we think that we can be that specific. And I'm all about specificity of the adjustments. And I know you appreciate this, Joe, with your background. But I absolutely believe that if you can be the more specific you can be from a philosophical point of view, the more specific your force is that you're using, the more likely innate intelligence is going to be able to utilize that force for some constructive purpose. Ideally, the correction of vertebral subluxation.
Yeah, I agree.
So that this, and this idea that, once you've corrected the subluxation, that person's set up for life. No, it's not like that, because we're all involved. We're all part of an environment that offers lots and lots of different opportunities for us to perhaps not be as adaptable as we could be. So, you can become subluxated again. And this idea, when I hear people saying, well, yeah, but if you're adjusting the same subluxations over and over again, you mustn't be doing a very good job. Well, I don't think it's quite that simple. And in some cases, as you know, you might make a couple of adjustments and then that person clears out for a long, long time without necessarily needing adjusting there again, but you put them under similar stresses and see what happens. There tends to be a reproduction in a lot of cases, right? So that's both physiological and philosophical because of the changes that occur in a living human body.
Dynamic.
Absolutely. And, you know, we can't wrap ourselves in cotton wool. We all know about the boy in the bubble, right? You know, you've got to adapt to the forces that are impacting upon your system. And if you're not adapting to forces, then you're not striving, because homeostasis.
A great message for, let's just say, current affairs. In closing a little bit, let's say that Phil McMaster has stepped away from his former duties, and I think you said you have. Did you say you had?
Yeah, I have. Yes, I have.
Okay, let's say he's gone a little bit mad. And
well, that happened a while ago, I think.
And somebody else has gone a little bit crazy and given you unlimited resources. What would his new college look like, or how will it? Is there anything that you would do tomorrow that is quite different or even way out in a college? Give me some mad ideas that we can sort of dream about. The McMaster Institute of Adaptology.
yeah, we could call it the School of Adapt Enablers. Well, there would be far more chiropractic in it, and far less non-chiropractic. One of the things that occurred to me when I first became the president of the college in 2013, I spent about 3 months basically just looking and listening and not saying much. Now, I was already very familiar with the situation, as you're aware, but one of the questions that I would ask people was this. I would say to them, why do we do that this way? And I kind of knew what the answer was going to be, and inevitably they'd say, well, that's the way we have to do it. And I said, well, who says that? And they said, well, the accreditation agencies, we have to do it that way in order to have accreditation. Now, I knew the accreditation really well, and I said, actually, that's not true. That's what you have been led to believe, or that's what the common misconception is. And what has happened since then as well is that the accreditation, the CCEA, the NZQA, TEXA, etc., have become far less prescriptive. They're more about outcomes. And I think it's great because there's a great opportunity there. And just before I finished up at the college, one of the things that we were working on, and I know it's being implemented to some extent right now, is you get a lot of curriculum bloat. So you end up with a whole lot of duplication of information, or a lot of information that's been deemed to be no longer sort of core or useful to this course, but doesn't get trimmed back. Oh. And so I would start from scratch, as it is. The college now is going to have to, change the curriculum and make sure that it meets all of the requirements. But as I mentioned before, the requirements are no longer so prescriptive. In other words, you could say, well, they would look to see that a student had performed 50 of these procedures. Well, that doesn't make them competent. You could have a student who's actually done 10 of them and is really, really good at it and competent, and someone who's done 50 and doesn't know what the hell they're doing. Right. So I think it's a good thing. I think the opportunity is there for colleges to adapt to the new accreditation environment, and most of the accreditation organizations around the world are starting to go to this outcomes-based assessment rather than rather than prescriptive. And I suppose I would, if I was designing it all again, I would make sure we were really, really clear on what all those requirements were. And I would strip back all of the non-essential stuff that seems to have crept in over the years and largely to satisfy those third-party payers again, that really has nothing to do with chiropractic.
Give me a little snippet of a non-essential that you can paint.
Oh, okay. Well, for instance, when I was a student at Sherman College, I had the great honor of representing the college at the WCCS meeting. And it was the first one that Sherman was invited to. And it was at what was then known as National College.
Right.
And I was stunned. I was absolutely stunned when I turned up there. And National College had what looked like a little hospital with hospital beds and oxygen and things like this. And
Wow.
and they were all walking around in their lab coats with their name on it and all this sort of stuff. And I thought, wow, this is different. And then in talking with some of the students, you know, they had to perform, in order to graduate, they had to perform 5 colonic irrigations. And I'm thinking to myself, I don't really see the link there with chiropractic.
What?
And, you know, what's the deal here? And, you know, are you competent at doing that after you've only done 5? And do they all have to be done on different people? I didn't ask, you know. But they also had to set a certain number. This was the prescriptive stuff, right? They also had to have set a certain number of broken bones and plastered them. And I'm thinking, well, that creates this perverse idea in my mind that you go out and bust someone's arm so you get your requirements. So I know that's very extreme.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, no, it was
I didn't
crazy.
even know that. I knew National was a broad-based approach, but that's ridiculous.
Yeah, that's what I thought. You know, I was 19 or 20 years old, thinking, wow, I didn't know, you know.
Well, what's a more sort of current example of chaff in a curriculum that you would throw out? Let's be brutal and don't be ashamed.
Well, one of the things would be, for instance, lab diagnosis.
Yeah.
Why on earth would we want these chiropractors to be able to, you know, that they have to memorize all the normal values for all the blood work and all that sort of stuff?
Mm.
I mean, even when the medical doctors these days, when they get the reports back, in the report it says what the normal is.
Yeah,
So
look, and I have to agree. When I was at Palmer, we did lab, and I thought, wow, this is great. You know, I can order a urine test. Never once did I.
No. And why would you? I mean,
well, yeah, just send them, have a good GP on hand, right?
That's exactly it.
Yeah. I guess there was a stage where we were trying to be everything. And that's
I think it was greed, Joe. It was greed. And I don't, you know, I got to say the Americans led the way here, because over there, what happened, of course, was the insurance companies over there were obliged to pay for whatever was in the scope of practice in that state at the time. So chiropractors then thought, well, you know, I can only claim for, you know, correcting subluxations. That's one code. If we had more codes, we could make more money. And so they ripped it with the X-ray. They also ripped it with by, and I don't want to sound too political here, but you know, I don't get this idea of lobbyists. That's to me, that's just, you know, people that you pay to bribe legislators to pass a law to say that, you know, these chiropractors, like in Oregon, you can deliver babies and get paid for it as long as you've done a course. So in other words, the legislators would say, yeah, we will pass that law, but you got to show us that it's taught at the schools. So then all of a sudden the pressure comes on the schools to start teaching obstetrics and gynecology in a chiropractic college that goes beyond just basic knowledge that you might need to have being a primary healthcare practitioner. And these, all of a sudden they say, well, I can deliver babies. I've done the course. And by the way, I can clip the ticket. Again, it seems it's quite it's an example that's out there, but it's true.
No, I agree with you. And look, the altruistic reason for a lobbyist is that you might have a novel way of helping people and you lobby government to recognise it. But you're saying the truth is that the centralised system becomes merely to benefit the system's perpetuation, making money. You're making money, then they're making money, and it's all bullshit in the end. And instead of lobbying to say, look, I've got like a blood test that can diagnose whatever. So you're quite right. But I think final thoughts, mate. This has been a fun discussion, really.
Joe. I like your approach.
You were just, a figurehead. Now I think you've got some brains, Phil. Gee.
I've done a good job of fooling you then, haven't I? No, I think essentially, and I suppose if I look back and think, well, what did I offer? I think what I offer is simplicity. I see things simply. I try not to get too caught up in convoluted conversations that are more pretentious academically than anything else.
Did you ever know Maxine McMullen?
I did. I knew Maxine quite well.
Did you?
Because I did.
I want to quote her then, because she used to say, "Don't sweat the small stuff." Oh, of course, she was a New Zealander. She was a New Zealander.
In fact, when Maxine passed away a few years ago, her sister, who lives just outside of Auckland, came to me with a box of books that Maxine wanted me to have.
Wow.
And they were some of the original green books with BJ's messages and things in them.
She must be sending me a little bit of message here, mate, because I don't know why I thought of it. I thought of her, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff. She was an amazing chiropractic story, remember?
Absolutely.
I think she had terminal cancer.
Yeah, she did.
And got adjusted, and there's no evidence for that, Phil.
No, but there is evidence that the body can heal itself of anything given the right opportunity and the right circumstances.
And that's why she was so powerful, because when she spoke of the body healing itself, she bloody well knew it.
Absolutely.
She did it. She was terminal, and she was stuffed, and she taught us some great stuff.
And Maxine didn't mince her words.
No.
She probably wouldn't. She wouldn't go down that well with some people at the moment these days, and she might be caught up in a few little pieces of controversy. But the one thing about Maxine is that I admire or admired is just that she did call it like it was. She was pretty straight up, and she said it like it was, and she didn't suffer from what I would consider, because she was a great academic, but she didn't suffer from academic pretentiousness. She took all that pretentiousness out.
No way. Yeah, you're right. And
I think that's a key. That's a key.
That is a key, isn't it? Especially at the moment. And that's one of my motivations for doing this podcast, was to not lose the wisdom of who we've got. And we no longer have Maxine and Virgil Strang and, God knows who else. And so I've had a great time chatting with you, Phil. I hope we can do it again. Maybe you'll announce your next step. And Jeremy Villani insisted you come on, and I'm grateful to him too. So, Phil, I hope we chat again soon.